This week, another cancellation. Instead, we tackle a ton of leadership and communications articles. Why CISOs and boards must speak the same language on cybersecurity. The hidden costs of not having a strong cybersecurity leader. Why cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. Leadership is an action, not a position, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. IT professionals, mark your calendars. Zero Trust World 2025 is happening in Orlando, Florida, February 19th to 21st. This event is tailored for IT leaders and cybersecurity experts who want actionable insights on zero trust strategies, practical solutions for modern threats, and meaningful connections with industry peers. Plus, take advantage of on-hand cyber hero boot camps, expert-led sessions, and the chance to earn CPE credits and your Cyber Hero certificate. Save $200 on your in-person registration using discount code ZTWSW25 at securityweekly.com/ZTW2025. Reserve your spot now. Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control on every executable that can happen in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind. Visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today. Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 382, recorded February 10th, 2025. I am your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me for this interview segment today are my co-host. Oh, it's not an interview segment. This is a news segment. First, Mr. Jason Albuquerque.
Hey, Matt.
Can we say butt whooping?
Butt whooping. I mean, Kansas City just got trounced yesterday. I wish I put a little wager with Miss Madeline, who we interviewed last week.
Yeah, right.
Because she's a Kansas City fan. So, no offense, but I mean, at the end of the day, Philly stepped up. They were just on point, offense, defense, special teams, all the way around. And Kansas City had none of that. All three schemes failed yesterday. I mean, their offensive line completely buckled. Their hands were butterfingers the entire game. Even Patrick Mahomes, I mean, he was just off his game. So couldn't have thought of a better outcome.
Yeah. He was on the run constantly, guys.
Nonstop.
Yeah. Also joining,
surprisingly, Saquon Barkley didn't have a huge game. I thought he was going to be a powerhouse.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that in a second. Let me get Ben in here first. Ben, welcome. Come on, Ben.
Hey, guys. How's it going? Yeah, I enjoyed the game as well, but was watching it more for the commercials and the potential for Elon Musk to run several commercials, which never materialized. So,
right?
Yeah, it was
interesting. Yeah.
It was a cluster.
Now, Jason, you and I talked about this on the pre-record for next week, so people can see this next week.
Yeah, that's right.
I thought Saquon would have a much better game, and he would be the difference, right?
Agreed.
But he didn't have a good game, and what aggravates me is they just kept trying to run him up the middle. Obviously, the middle was not where it was, but then Jalen Hurts just was phenomenal, offsetting both from a running perspective and a passing perspective.
Used his legs, passing was on point. I mean, some of his passes were just missing.
Oh my God, dimes. After that last turnover, when they were up, I think it was 27-0 or whatever, and he drops that 50-yarder right into. Oh my God.
Absolutely. I mean, my son and I were literally saying, could this be a shutout? That would be amazing, like at halftime,
Yeah. So I get a text after church yesterday from my daughter, who is the executive producer on the show, and she says, "Have a happy Super Bowl day," with a picture of the Superdome. She went to the game yesterday.
She did?
Yeah.
Oh,
Renee was at the Super
amazing.
Bowl.
That's awesome. Good for her.
Yeah, it was in New Orleans. She lives in Mandeville, just outside of New Orleans, and her fiance's boss ended up getting tickets, so they all went to the game yesterday.
That's awesome. That must have been a
cool
blast.
is that?
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. All right, one quick announcement, and then we're going to get into articles. Security Weekly listeners save $100 on their RSA Conference 2025 full conference pass. RSA Conference will take place April 28th to May 1st in San Francisco and on demand. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC25 and use the code 5U5SECWeekly. Hope to see you there. All right, so we had another cancellation, and half of our interview segments on this show I give to the community because I want to bring folks in from the community, do interviews. But we've had 3 community cancellations already. It's only February for crying out loud. And what's the bummer is I could bring other people on, but when you cancel last minute, I can't bring other people on. I don't have enough time. So anyway, so I just pulled a bunch of leadership communications articles.
Hey,
yeah,
the best of it, right? These are great. I mean, the articles were awesome.
Yeah, so let's dig into it. So, why CISOs and boards must speak the same language on cybersecurity. Jason, I know you'll get into this in a second because you do such a great job. I love the concept of the article. The problem is there's like no meat. Like I agree 100%. Like, yes, you should, align metrics and talk about financials, etc. But then it's like you just don't see any like clear kind of path on how to actually make this happen.
No, that's the key. I mean, any type of recommendations on how to actually execute and make, drive to an outcome, we're lacking. In all honesty, one of the best things I took out of the article was a link off to another article about how they, related financial performance to a strong cybersecurity program, because there's one sentence in there that says companies with advanced cybersecurity programs see 372% shareholder return. That for me was interesting. So I double clicked on that and moved over to the other article and started really reading the research that they had. And it was a report from Diligent and BitSight. So if you get an opportunity, click on that, jump into the report. But yeah, very high level, right? All right. Directors still identify cybersecurity as a challenge to oversee. Yep, got that. We talk about that a lot. Clear communication between the CISO and the board has never been more critical. 15, 20 years we've been talking about that. Sure. Right. And then you have to link, cyber risk to financial consequences. Well, yeah. How do you, align cyber risk to the business? These are conversations, but the do hard is, how do you do that? How do you do that effectively? Right. How do you build that kind of program and that kind of trust and that kind of influence? Those are the hard things.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I was hoping the article would get into. Instead, look, I get it. Like, boards should ensure CISOs are covered by their company directors and officers insurance policy. We've talked about that for years on the show. Yes, I agree. But that's not solving the language issue, right? Second, consistent check-ins should also be in place. Yes, agreed. They should be. But
that
again,
doesn't talk about what you should talk about in those consistent check-ins, right?
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the challenge with this. I think they talked about a lot of things that, everybody's aware of, but they really didn't get at the meat of what the title articulated they were going to talk about, which was how to have those conversations and what that language should be and how the dialogue goes on, right? That's the problem.
And how to do it.
Yeah.
Like, this is my day job, guys, right? Like, I am building a cyber risk quantification platform. That's what I do. Like, I know how to do this because I have customers doing it. And in these articles, I'd like to see some guidance on the hard part of building this kind of financial risk quantification conversation. Because look, what we're doing is interesting, but it's not the only way to do it. And I really want to see other approaches and other ways that this can work, because I don't think it's a one size fits all. Actually, I know it's not a one size fits all, right? But we're not getting those kind of do hard parts. Maybe again, this might be one of our next Say AZ do hards, is we actually get into the risk quantification stuff, because it is the hard part.
That's right. I mean, the closest that they came to even driving into that discussion was they mentioned, number one, the board should have a designated cyber champion on the board. Okay, there's a start, right? And then the second piece was having that person work with the CISO on, determining materiality and determining, business risk appetite and things of that nature. All right, so you're starting that conversation a little bit there, building the relationship, but what's that next layer down, right?
But even in that, Jason, like, what does that mean that you have a defined cyber person on the board? If like you've got 10 existing board members and you just pick number 7 and say you're the cyber guy, like, I don't know what that buys you versus like just ad hoc picking somebody when something happens, right? Like there's nothing differentiated about that. I mean, we really need to start as an industry talking about, you have to have expertise on the board, and expertise is not an hour class at an NACD meeting, or, you happen to read a paper. Like, that's not expertise. It's got to be, and I think that goes across the tech stack, right? Like the people that I've talked to about this, and, DDN talks about this, like, I think it's technology as a whole. Like, it's such an important, critical part of the business as we move forward. Every company's a technology company, right? If you make toilet paper, you're a technology company through and through, right? Because you got to send that toilet paper, you got to project financials, you got to figure out your customers, how you're doing, like, connections, like, all that stuff is technology. And so if that's the case, how do you not have people on the board who actually really understand technology? And as a subset, one of those people should really understand cyber, because that's your largest risk. And so that's just, to me, that's table stakes, and we're nowhere near that yet.
No, right? Not even close. Not even close.
No. Then you take in this next article where half of the C-suite leaders will likely leave in 2 years, something like 55%, and 27% in 6 months. It's like, okay, well, there goes that concept out the window.
56% extremely likely to quit their current jobs in the next 2 years, with 27% at 6 months. I mean, it just shows where we're at from a turnover, a burnout. Some of the things that we were talking about were, lack of growth opportunities and feeling undervalued. It just shows the cultures that we're building out there in our businesses.
Yeah. And look, we keep adding C-level execs to the mix, right? Like, we talk about, the people wanting a seat at the table. You've got, CTOs, risk officers, security guys, like, now there's a chief AI officer coming in. Like, you can't have all these guys, right? Like, who are just part of a large organization, and have them feel connected, have them feel like they're offering something to the org, that they're part of something, that they're growing something. So they get burnt out, they get frustrated. I mean, we've seen it on the CISO side time after time, that people just talk about, they come in, they're kind of sold a bill of goods almost, that, hey, here's what we want to do. We want to build a great program, world class. We want to grow that. And then, 18 months later, they're not getting budget. They're not getting head count. Like, it's like being pushed to the side. They're never part of the discussions. And so, it's not a surprise that, CISO specifically, which we have great affinity for, but across the C-level, when you're adding people and you're not giving them connection to the rest of that C-level and having fundamentally important conversations, that they decide that they don't want to be there anymore.
And at the end of the day, a lot of these folks, including the CISO, started a career within the organization, and they probably had a reporting structure up to a high-level leader like the CEO, or maybe the COO or CFO. But one of the trends I've seen a lot with CEOs lately, and some CFOs are doing the same thing, they're thinning the herd. They're sitting back saying, you want to know what? We built out all these C-level executives that, sure, we need the expertise within the organization, but I can't sustain 12 direct reports or 9 direct reports as a CEO. So guess what they're doing now? They're saying CFO, COO, and maybe the HR leader, you're reporting to me. And guess what? Everything else is going to be below those leaders in the org structure. So
when I've talked about it directly, and I've also heard from colleagues, like, the most consistent feedback I get on, like, why the CISO, like, I'd like to report to the CEO, why can't that happen? It's because I don't have the bandwidth, right? One, and the second is I don't understand it. Those are the top two, right?
Absolutely.
I have to imagine that's being replicated in other areas of the organization as well. Look, I heard this truism, I'll say, back early in my career, that if you're a manager and you've got more people reporting to you that can like eat 2 pizzas at a dinner, like you've got too
Right.
many freaking people, right? Like you'll never be able to
Yeah.
put the focus
Yeah.
time in. And it's a weird thing to think about it that way, but it's true, right? You can only have so many people before that span of control is just too large. And
Yep.
I think that's a problem that a lot of businesses are facing and trying to figure out how to map it well. And you look, it could be that, a C-level person reports to another C-level person as long as they're still in the inner circle, right? But when it
Right.
starts to become a name only and you're just sitting there with the C-level title because you're the most senior person there, you're really a director, you're really a VP, like don't give a C-level title, right? Like suffer through that and figure out how you need to grow and how you need to mature to get to the point where you do need a C-level person.
Yeah. And that's the law of unintended consequences, right? Because as soon as you build that other layer between you and let's say the CISO, now there's the filter, and that filter is where we get stuck, right? So it's the conundrum that we're facing right now.
Yeah. And I'm still seeing announcements for mass layoffs in the tech space still in lieu of AI investment, right? Which is only putting more pressure on the C-level executives, right? They have fewer people, higher expectations because they think AI is going to solve it all. It's not making anybody's job easier.
No, I mean, the mantra now is do more with less.
Yeah.
Do more with less. That's it.
And,
I mean, we came out of a really tough economic year.
So the initial foray into AI, right, was these major entrants, right? OpenAI, ChatGPT, it's really big, right? But we saw this with recent, input from a Chinese AI model that you're going to start seeing more and more of this happen, and they'll get smaller and smaller and broader and broader. And so the ability of any person in the org to stay up to, all right, what are we doing in AI is going to become harder as it moves forward because it's going to become a fractured environment until it starts to coalesce again.
I mean, most organizations don't even know why they want to use AI at this point. They don't even have a business case.
Right.
They say, turn that Copilot thing on because I hear it's going to be
cool.
People are
talking about it and they think they need it, right? That's the golden ticket, right?
Right.
How do we turn this up? AI.
And the majority of those organizations have never even thought about their data landscape and securing that out of the gate. We talked about this, right? We've talked about this where, they're looking at AI as an easy button, flip a switch, and it's going to make magic happen. They haven't even thought about protecting their data at all.
Yeah. And they don't even know the use cases for AI and what they're going to use it for. Now, I've seen some really interesting use cases because I get pings all the time, from different startups. I saw some really cool stuff today, and at some point in the future, we might talk about it. But what some of these things can do, and when you start to put them into very specific use cases, like the SOC analyst role, and how it can augment the SOC analyst to look through data and help you kind of triage in an automated way. It's pretty cool. Like that's a very valid use case. Copilot for the sake of a Copilot or another chat bot is not what I would consider innovation in the AI space.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I did pull out of this article that I really, really loved, and I think organizations don't think about a lot, is they called the chief HR officer out and said, you need to be the champion of mental health. I mean, we've talked about this so many times on this show about how mental health for CISOs is so important, right? Because there's so many stressors. But having your HR leader be that person who develops programs that are mental health centric, identify where the pressures are within the workplace, fight to improve that work-life balance, and really pushing that mental health.
Don't you see that as being a really difficult shift? Like that will require a
100%.
fundamental difference, right? Because right now, I think that was one of the things that I learned, like going into leadership role, is like as an employee, you think that leadership is there for management, right? Yep. But as management, you learn that leadership, that HR and legal aren't really there for management or employees. They're there for the company as an entity. And when you start involving like the challenges and the stresses of mental health and how that affects you as an employee, you as a manager, like interaction with teams, like there's a lot of trust that's required there. And so I think
100%.
that will be a huge challenge for the HR teams to overcome, is like, how do we become a trusted partner, right? Versus the other.
It's the way that HR needs to move, though.
Yeah, I agree.
Because again, law of unintended consequences, just in the way we hire, has become so transactional. Never mind the way that they operate with employees within the business is transactional. That's not what HR should be, right?
Yeah.
HR should be strategic. They should be building culture. They should be doing things like this that add value to the employee base, and they're built for it. They're built for it. They just need to learn how to do it, and they need to shed the old school mentality of HR. Plain and simple.
We're going to get to culture in about 1, 2, 3, 4 articles. So hold that thought. The hidden cost of not having a strong cybersecurity leader. Now, there's some good stuff in here, but my biggest beef with this article is it's not all about compliance. And the author makes it seem like compliance, and it's not, folks. Like,
well, Matt, let me jump in because I'm smirking here because I'm reading this article and I get about halfway and I go, son of a gun, this feels like it was written by AI. And I look up at the author. Look at the author. The author says Paris.ai cybersecurity. There's no name. There's no person. It's Paris.ai cybersecurity. I'm like, AI wrote this all day long. Somebody put in a prompt. AI wrote it. I'm telling you.
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Just like I did with the Eagles.
We need to run this through the filter and see if it comes up. What's the confidence rate? Yeah, it's 87% confidence this was written by an AI.
So that's my guess. I think this was built by prompts.
Built by prompts.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Well, there we go.
Well, you look at the article, the key takeaways are, if you don't have a strong cyber program, yes, reputational damage is a risk. Customer trust is a risk. Regulatory fines is a risk. Missed business opportunity and partnerships a risk. Yep. All of that.
Yep.
Plus some.
All that plus some. All right, next. I like this next article, actually. The CISO's role in advancing innovation in cybersecurity.
100%.
Yeah.
Again, conversations that we have about the positioning of a CISO within the organization, and they're so well positioned to help drive innovation, right? So well positioned. Anywhere from partnering with startups, which has its own risks, right?
It does.
Course, but you really have to be smart about that. Working with incubator or centers of excellence, looking at venture capital, leveraging your CISO network. Like, all of those things are so important. And we are in the position, we're in that role that the CIO was in 20 years ago. We're in that place now. We're built to be able to drive innovation through the business.
Now,
hey,
remember,
Jason, just to interject in here real quick on the previous article, I ran it through a humanizer. 100% came back as the likelihood it was written by AI. By the way,
yeah, did you?
Yeah, 100%.
Should have bet it in Vegas.
That's a note. Be careful when you're writing your articles out there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly right. What I like about this article is the conversation we had with Jeff and Jess over at Forrester a few weeks ago, talking about kind of the CISO exit strategy. Remember, if you want to sit on a board, you have to understand how to run a business, right? Yeah. And what I like about this article is if you partner with startups, work with incubators or VCs, you have an opportunity in your career to actually probably go start a startup. Right. Which gives you a ton of business experience on top of your cybersecurity experience to eventually get that board seat you might want. And this is how you kind of do it. Like, this is how you bridge part of that. As a CISO, working with startups, understanding how they work, working with the VCs, how funding happens, et cetera, kind of takes you down that path. And I think it's a really interesting path for some CISOs.
Yeah. Obviously the organization I'm with now isn't a startup. But one of the best things I did was migrate over to that chief operating officer role. The level of integration into the business, I sit with the board all the time. We're having conversations around P&L. We're having those really, really business-centric, strategic conversation all the time. And I learn every day. I've been there 3+ years now, and I'm still learning every day. It's absolutely amazing. You want to start embedding yourself, learning the business. And by partnering with a startup, you start to learn.
Oh, yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. I mean, I love working with startups because startups they do some really interesting things, but then they don't understand how enterprises work sometimes, right? So you have to know, like, yeah, I got this really cool thing that like automates all this account disablement. Yeah, not going to fly in the enterprise.
Right.
Like, you just, sorry guys, it's a cool concept. It's a really great feature, but realize that somebody's going to make a human decision whether they're going to allow that disablement to happen or not. So just don't think you can automate your way through large organizations, because it doesn't work way.
Yeah, I mean, you'll have enterprise level leaders being thanks, but no thanks.
Right, exactly. Why cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. We've been saying this for a long time.
Very, very long time.
Very long time.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the way they laid it out. You know, we sink or swim together. I kind of like that. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we all own this. We're all accountable, right? You know, it's like Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership. You know, I mean, that's obviously for business leaders, but we got to take that same type of mentality when it comes to cybersecurity, all the way down to the end user, all the way up the chain to the board of directors. We all own a piece of this, and it has to be that shared responsibility. And then I like how they kind of called it out, where shared responsibility is not just for cloud, because you know how AWS and Microsoft and GCP, they all have that shared responsibility matrix, so they can't get sued. Yeah. Well, you know, it's you have to think of it that way. It's top to bottom. Everybody has a role.
Yeah. Well, we laid out that blueprint last week, right? Like, it broke it down by role.
Yeah.
Across the organization, across the C-suite, like what the expectations are, right? So it was a really good blueprint for this article, which is, this is what you can kind of expect from each of those roles from a shared security responsibility structure.
Yeah.
I think the CEO owns this, though. Like, ultimately, look,
yeah.
The CEO owns everything ultimately, right? But look, what I mean by that in a more concrete way is, for me, this is culture. This is corporate culture, and this is manifest by the way that the CEO pushes this out to everybody. Because I've seen this fail a bunch of times where, yeah, it's everybody owns security, but the CEO doesn't actually make those changes within the org to culture that actually make everyone take notice of that. So if every time something happens, it's like, no, we're going to move ahead with product, we're going to move forward with sales because it's more important, and we're willing to do risky stuff, everybody thinks it's okay to do risky stuff, right?
Exactly.
And that culture thing, we've talked about this a bunch of times, but it's the hardest thing to get right. And there's a line in here when it says, you know, when a breach happens, you know, it's the CEO and the CISO will be rightly held accountable. I don't really think we've held the CEOs be held accountable. Yeah. Right? Like, it's a culture failure almost all the time. It's a culture failure. Yes, it's somebody did something wrong. Somebody tweaked a setting. There was a bug in the code. Yes, that's all true. But that goes back to a culture problem that the CEO let happen.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, CEOs need to be leading by example, not just by saying that they support the security program and the CISO. Right? It's got to be lead by example. And hey, by the way, I've been in situations where a CEO will sit back and say, "We cannot do this," but have the because, and have the reasoning, and articulate that out to the rest of the C-suite, so that the C-suite understands, yes, cybersecurity is important. Yes, protecting our infrastructure, our data is extremely important, but our risk appetite is allowing us to not go down this path, and we're going to choose, right? We're going to make a choice.
And Jason, how often have you seen the CEO or the board members be like, "Yeah, don't install that app on my PC," or "Don't turn this setting on because it's impacting my work." And so that instantly like sets a tone throughout 100%. The C-level, and then that gets passed down. It's like, it's the worst thing you can do.
The ultimate one is and I've seen this plenty of times. We want to institute MFA across the board. Then a week later, hey, can you pull that off the board of directors, the CEO and the CFO?
Yeah.
They don't want it.
Yeah.
Right?
Because they don't have access to any important information.
Oh, yeah, no, nothing, right?
Yeah.
So, this old saying that Dale Carnegie contributed: "Here lies the body of William J., who died maintaining his right of way. He was right, dead right, as he sped along, but he's just as dead as if he were wrong."
Exactly. Love it. Truth. 100% truth.
Truth.
Love that.
Truth. All right. Speaking of culture, building a culture of security, but I'm not sure this is the way we're going to do it. Employee
No.
awareness and training strategies.
It's not.
Because
Employee awareness programs and training strategies are the reason why people roll their eyes every time you talk about cybersecurity. Because it's the mandated video training or online training, checking the box that they have to do every time. If you're embedding it in the culture, it's part of the DNA of the organization. It's part of every communication, whether it's from IT, security, finance, HR, the CEO. It's embedded in the culture. It's embedded in what you do. Yes, there are going to be educational and knowledge transfer exercises that you have to go through, but it's not the annual check in the box and, once a quarter phishing training that you go smack somebody on the back of the head because they clicked the link. That's not it. It's not going to work. Never has.
Yeah. It's got to be continuous, right? Like we talk about continuous monitoring, but you got to do continuous training, right? Yeah. And, I think you mentioned something in the previous article. We were talking about the CEO and how he broadcasts out. And you said, if he's telling people what to do and actually then following through. But I think telling a story, right? And giving people the why of, okay, let's walk through, right? Here's a story about something that happens and giving people the thread, not the don't do this, but here's what somebody did. Here's why it went wrong. And here's what they could have done on the other side to fix it. That completeness of story and vision lets people understand and connect. Oh, I now understand why I should have two-factor authentication.
And then even the next level of relate that story to how it could impact our company, our people, our clients, our partners, tie it all back so that they
real
feel
example.
How it would feel if they were in those shoes. Make it real.
Yeah. And it does talk about some of those in here, aligning security with organizational goals, right? If you can tie it back into the business, then people understand why it's so important versus just pounding them over the head with training video after training video after training video. Right. It talks about recognizing positive behavior. Look, see something, say something, and then then make it a positive experience, not a negative experience, right? Like that just changes the culture.
Positive is so much better. To stop calling out people for what they did wrong, but start praising the people for what they did right. That's so important.
Here's the other part that we forget too. Praising people for what they do right. Raising your hand for a false positive is the right thing to do. Yeah. You don't smack people over the head for raising their hand for a false positive. You want that behavior. Thank you very much. We looked into it. Wasn't an issue, but please, if you ever see anything like that again, let us know.
Right. Hey, stop trying to train that out of people, right? I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, and here's why that's a false positive. And please, if you, that doesn't work. All you're doing is masking potential, real items that you're going to miss because people are going to be like, oh, that's probably a false positive. I'm not going to submit.
You're making people uncomfortable communicating a potential risk because they're going to sit back and say, if this is a false positive, they're going to get angry or they're going to make fun of me or they're going to say some little snarky comment that I didn't know what the heck I was doing.
And that's not building.
You don't build the right behavior that way.
Yeah. You're not building a security first culture.
No way. No way.
No. Yep. Why cybersecurity needs probability, not predictions. Now, I pulled this article in because we do not do predictions on this show. I've made it point that we're not doing predictions on this show, right? We're not doing New Year's resolutions and we're not doing predictions. Darn it. Yep. But again, this is similar to, I think, the first or second article where I agree, but again, how? Show me the how.
Absolutely. Yep. 100%. Yeah. It didn't have any type of execution strategy or ways you can move the needle at all. Like the other article, one of the things I pulled out of it had nothing to do with the article. it was just a mention that, even though in 2024 they saw an increase of claims rise by like 35%, they were all at a lower rate. So the cyber attacks weren't as expensive.
Right.
Is what I read there, which was interesting for me. I mean, I didn't dig into any of the details because they didn't have a linking report like the other article had, but I'd be interested to see where that data came from and look at that.
Yeah, we actually use historical loss data. There is a large database of this data out there, and we actually use it in our solution to provide out-of-the-box quantified risk scenarios, right?
Yep.
Because that's kind of the hard part, right? That's the how. Like, yes, probabilities are important, but how do we use those to actually generate an outcome? And I was hoping they would go into that because he comes from the insurance side. But this data is available. And if people know where it is and know how to use it, you can actually really start to pinpoint some of these probabilities around likelihood and impact that can allow you to start to quantify risks in a data reinforced way. And that's what's been missing in this industry. But not a lot of people they talk about the concepts, but the concepts are no good to people unless you show them how to use it. And that's what I'd like to see more of.
I agree with that 100%. Like that was one of the challenges in a CISO seat sitting there, right? Is everybody, we've talked about it, like how to talk more about the language of the business. This is the language of the business, right? If you can go in with data. My challenge was a CISO was always, look, I've got plenty of tools that are outputting security data and information, but I don't have a way to take that and turn that into, like plug that into a system that will then generate and say, look, I can tell you with a probabilistic certainty that we should invest here or not invest here, right? And it's kind of the swag of it's the art, the art, not the science of I think we should put our money here, right? And I think the business is looking more for this, but you're right 100%. Like, how do I get it? Like, I'm a struggling CISO. I don't have time to go down this path, right, of learning all this stuff. I need somebody to bring me solutions that can actually take the data, bring it together, and then be able to present that information.
And Ben, on top of that, even data from other organizations in your vertical.
Yeah.
So you understand the vertical risk better, right? Or organizations that are your size, or to be able to
when I've worked on the vendor side, I've said, look, we have that data. We should provide it more and say, I'm not going to tell you company X, but I'm going to say companies of your type, right, in this vertical of this size, have this likelihood of this happening. And like, why we don't do that more as an industry, it boggles my mind because it's so valuable to the CISO.
Yeah. Because I mean, having your data set is great, but being able to have that external data where you can kind of mash it and compare it and say, where am I against, industry competitors or folks in my vertical or companies of this size or companies with this same type of risk profile, that's where it becomes very, very powerful data that you can take back and now go tell stories with that, right?
Just so you guys know, that's exactly what we do, by the way.
Well, beautiful.
There's a thing. So I don't like to do this very often.
Matt. It's needed.
But we did. So we created a free cyber risk analysis offering at CyberSaint that allows you to put in your industry, your revenue, and your employee size. We look at the entire historical loss database, over 1 million records, and we tell you what your peers have actually faced from a loss perspective.
Yep.
And we quantify it.
Yeah.
Against 18 out-of-the-box risk scenarios.
There you go.
That's the power. The data's there. And if you can use it, and then you can use it to benchmark yourself. Right? To say, oh, wait, these are what my peers are going through. How do I compare? And look at your data and compare them. That helps you, Ben, decide where should I potentially focus, right? So everything we do in our platform is all quantified so that not only are you looking at the risk in a quantified way, peer to yourself, any dollar you spend to reduce risk, we can also quantify.
Yeah.
So we can tell you whether it's worth the investment or not.
That's
pretty
powerful.
Right, it's power.
It is. So yeah, I mean, I guess beside the stat that I talked about, the two things that were two bullets that were valuable in the article, right? Putting data and AI to work and then resisting FUD. Sweet. There we go.
Yep.
Summed up.
There you go. Use actual historical loss data, people.
That's right.
It's eye-opening. because the data's there. Yeah. All right. Next one. When technology isn't the problem, the psychology of IT transformation. I love this article because we obviously everything's digitally transforming in some form or fashion. There's certain industries that have not transformed very well, including the one I work in. Like the governance, risk management, compliance transformation story is still a train wreck. But it's not just a technology problem. It's the people side of this. What if people
100%.
don't want
Always
to
the
adopt
people
this?
problem.
Yes.
It's always people.
Adoption is an epidemic within organizations. Do you know how many companies you go into, and it's not just security technology, it's all of their IT,
Yeah.
right? You walk in the door and then you do a level of an assessment on their leverage of certain technologies, and you realize that their employee base is leveraging maybe 20% of the capabilities of the entirety of the system. And then you compare that with what they're paying on a monthly, annual, whatever the case may be, that investment in that technology, you bring that to the CFO and their eyes are wide open at that point. We're paying this amount of money to only adopt 20% of the capability. What's the problem? And it's always the people. It's always the people. They're not adopting the technology for a multitude of reasons, though. Either they were handed the most important feature functionality for their department and nobody else thought to sit down with them and train them on the rest. And then they just allowed that train to keep going down the road. That's a huge problem. Or they decided, the process is a little bit too cumbersome, so I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to do it my old way. And they're not leveraging it. But nobody thought to sit back and say, hey, how do we do a business process mapping or continuous improvement engagement here to make the process easier, to leverage the technology better, to create automations, to enhance what we have? They're not doing that either. So, of course, people are people, humans are humans. They're going to go down the path of least resistance and do it their way.
Yep. They're going to use that spreadsheet to augment your beautiful cloud solution.
That's right.
Because you didn't build that
you're paying
one formula. Yeah, right.
And look, vendors could learn this well, right? Like on the front side, we talked about adoption and the problem of getting technologies right. Like engage somebody to look at what problem you're trying to solve and the psychology of how it will be best adopted. Like it's not always about the technology being the best, right? No. You could derive a great technology, but if you've made it difficult for people to consume the psychology of it, then you're going to fail, right? And I think organizations need to look at this internally as an enterprise, how you deploy technology, but also vendors that are trying to produce technologies that they want people to buy and use, right? Make it easy for people to take on and implement.
One of the best things I did early in my career as a leader in technology was go through lean training. Lean is like Six Sigma, right? Mm-hmm. Because what that taught me is that really bad process with a shiny technology on top of it is still a really bad process, and it's going to fail. It's going to fail at the end of the day. So you have to really look at it from a business process optimization perspective, care about the stakeholders that are involved, and eliminate the waste from their process. You have to. Otherwise, humans won't want to use it. And they will undermine it at every chance they get. To the point where they go out and they get shadow IT. They'll go out and buy some crazy cloud program that they can get for $2.99 a month and go stick all their data there because it's easier for them to operate and do their job. We failed ourselves in many instances where we sit back and we have employees who come up and say, I would rather be doing this a different way. And IT says, no, you have to do it our way. We spend $1.5 million on this ERP system. That's the way you have to do it. Guess what? They're going to undermine it. They're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah. And that's why we see multiple systems trying to solve for the same problem. It's crazy. Yeah. You walk into an enterprise and you're like, where are you managing your issues? Well, I got some in ServiceNow. I got some over in Jira. I got some in my Jira. Right. They're all over the place.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. 100%. I've seen organizations that have 3 CRMs. Yeah. Because one division wants to use one CRM, another division wants to use another CRM, and then you have marketing using theirs. What does that tell you?
Yeah.
They failed all around. They're spending bad money. It's bad busy between the departments. And now they don't have any type of centralized data. It's horrible. Absolutely horrible. But it's up to the executives, the IT executives, to build that culture, evangelize for those type of conversations, and really care about the user base to make our lives better, not just dictate from upon high, this is what we're going to be using, deal with it. It's not how we operate.
You can take all those systems, throw it into a big data lake, analyze it, throw some Tableau over the top of it, and build your own custom
He's so
solution.
Of
cheap.
course.
So cheap, Matt.
Yeah, so cheap.
Remember, executives, we're supposed to be being fiduciaries, right? There's nothing more powerful than going to a CFO saying, "Here's how we can consolidate these systems and save money and get better efficiency."
Money. Yeah, yeah, and have access to all of our data in one place.
Yep.
This next article: leadership is an action, not a position.
Hey, you know what? This leads perfectly in from the last article, because one of the the bullet points in here was service over status.
Yep.
I get it. You're the CIO. I get it. You're the VP of technology. I get it. You're the CISO. You're there to serve your people. You're there to serve your clients. You're there to serve the employees. You are in the service business. Act accordingly.
Build trust, right? I mean, build trust
accordingly.
up with the teams. You'll get a lot more out of it than trying to come from the top and just say,
100%.
"Hey, my power gives me authority."
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong, and I think I may have said it on the show before. There's nothing wrong with saying, all right, Mr. and Mrs. Executive, what's the outcome you're looking to achieve? Great. Now I understand that. Well, maybe we can't take this direct route to get there, but I'm going to show you how we can. So that way we're secure and we get you to the outcome that you need. And I always leverage like the highway systems. We have highway systems here in Rhode Island, right? You have 95 that goes right up the gut. Then you have 295 that goes around the city. I'll get you to the outcome better, more securely going 295, because you want to know what? There's an accident and there's construction. There's a bridge out on 95. But I'm going to get
you have to
That's
start with your
constantly,
requirements.
Jason. That's constantly.
all the time.
Understand where people are trying to go and what they're trying to get, not how they want to get there, right? Like,
That's right.
there's a time and the place for that, but I mean, you really have to understand what the goal is, and then let the people who are best determinate at figuring out how to reach that goal kind of put that solution in place, right? But take an ounce of how do people want to do stuff, right? What is the feelings behind it? Like, you have to look at the soft side of it as well, but you have to account for it the best way. Like, you can't just do it because, hey, it's the thing I've done in the past and it's the easiest place for us to get there. They may not be the best thing for the business.
That's
right?
100%. Yeah, and I mean, to get back to the article, the moral of the story is it doesn't matter where you land in the org chart to be able to have those conversations and evangelize for those things and show true leadership, right? It doesn't matter. It's not your title. It's not where you land in the org chart. Start leading now. You'll get to that title that you want if you are a leader, you model the way, and you lead by example.
Yeah. Yep. The best paragraph in here for any aspiring leader: leadership isn't about waiting for a title. It's about how you choose to show up every day. It's about taking responsibility, setting a positive example, and lifting others up. If you focus on your actions rather than your position, you'll find that leadership isn't something you're given, it's something you create.
100%. 100% agreed.
Yep.
Yes. All right. Last article. Don't let bad time management undermine your leadership. I love this article for a couple of reasons. As leaders, we talked a little bit about this earlier. If you've got 19 direct reports, guess what? You're not going to have enough time to spend with all those leaders, right? So that's part of that fits into this. But there's a couple interesting flaws that I learned early in my career that are very, very important, especially when you build things. Building things requires capacity. It requires setting right expectations that are just super important, right? And because you can get timing wrong very quickly. Yeah. And when I was going through this article, I went, ooh, flaw number 1 combined with flaw number 3, right? Like, rules to live by. As a product guy, I'm always getting requested to build something faster.
Yeah,
right? But if you don't understand your capacity, you can't set proper priorities or boundaries
That's right.
with the people asking for it. And those two to me are so foundational in the way I think about product development, our roadmaps. Like those two flaws have to be synchronized. You have to understand those relationships.
Yep.
Because it's the only way you're going to set proper expectations when it comes to how long is it going to take you to deliver something. And that's what I loved about this article, because those two hit me every single day.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think all of these are incredible, right? And it's funny, Matt, the ones that hit me the most are more of the softer leadership style things, right? Like asking for help last minute when you knew in advance that you had a big presentation or a big report out to the board of directors, or, and the worst thing that can happen to an employee is when you have a leader, a CEO, a CISO. Hey, I have a board of directors meeting this afternoon, and I need you to go drop everything that you're doing and go get me this information and that report and this thing and that thing. You start doing that over time, that's going to really, really wear down on people, right? Because you're not preparing them. And then you're going to hold them responsible for the accuracy of that data, the accuracy of the reports, and all of that information, right? It's just it's not a fair thing to do, and you're not leading by example. That's awful. You don't do that to folks, right? Not being available. And I added to that one, habitually canceling meetings, because I've seen executives do this all the time, right? You're not available to have a conversation, even though you say you have an open door policy. Anybody can come to me, but you're never around. You're too busy, right? Or you put all these great meetings on the calendar, or, lunches or one-on-ones or all these things. And it's like every week or every month or every other week, sorry, I got to cancel. I'm too busy. Sorry, I got to cancel. I'm traveling. Sorry, I got to cancel it. You're not building trust. You're not building trust. If you habitually do that, you're going to erode the trust that you have with your employees.
I actually think it's worse than that, Jason. If you're habitually canceling those meetings, it actually shows kind of a disrespect for
100%.
the people you had meetings with, right? Because, hey, you weren't important enough for me to keep this. I had something more important come up. And so that happens. Like, look, let's just be honest. Like, as an executive, as a manager, like, there are things that come up, right? But if you're doing it all the time, it conveys this message of everything else is more important than you. You're kind of pushing those people out.
That's right. That's right. But then you expect those folks to be there in the trenches for your company, for your department, for your business unit, right? And you expect them to have a level of allegiance. How can you if that's the way you're running your culture? Like, you can't. And then the last one for me, and it's such a little nuanced thing, but it's so important. So important. Withholding recognition, giving credit, right? Do you know how many leaders I've seen get up at company meetings, town hall sessions, articulate an incredible idea, but that idea was part of a meeting that someone on their team brought to the table, and they don't recognize them for that, or a team brought that idea to the table, and then they use the words I, me, instead of we, us, and then specific names. That starts to erode as well. Give credit. I mean, at the end of the day, you're not the smartest person in the room all the time, if ever, sometimes. So give credit where credit's due, right? I always say I've looked at leadership of like being a conductor of an orchestra. I'm not a great violin player. I can't play the cello. But what I'm good at is taking all of these masters of craft and making some beautiful music together. That's what I want to be good at. So when your cellist is kicking ass, tell everybody about it. That's the key.
Yeah. Agreed.
I'll drop the mic right there.
There you go. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. Next week is President's Day, but don't miss our pre-recorded Say Easy, Do Hard on data inventory and classification. We'll see you again in 2 weeks on Business Security Weekly.